A friend in need is a friend indeed.
Okay, I can first. Okay, so this time. Szanowna pani redaktor,
Madam, the situation is very complex.
Well, Kamala's laugh prompting Ukrainian President Zelensky's former press secretary to tweet it would be a, quote, tragedy if VP Harris were to win the presidency. The spokesperson since deleted her tweet responding to that moment there. The VP was asked if the U.S. would accept refugees and laughed at the question during a joint press conference with the Polish president yesterday. Well, joining us to discuss this is former Trump 2016 foreign policy advisor and Newsmax contributor George Papadopoulos. Hey, George.
Hi, John. Thank you for having me.
Great to be with you again. And I think the former spokesperson here is tweeting what a lot of us are feeling. Kamala Harris today, too, said that our commitment to Article 5 of the NATO treaty is ironclad. But I thought that's the whole point of having the NATO treaty, so we don't have to question our commitment to it.
Well, look, global security, prosperity, and stability around the world requires American leadership at the heart of a vigorous network of allies. And what Kamala Harris showcased to the world regarding her bizarre laughter at a very serious issue, including millions of individuals who are now refugees, not only in Europe, but in other parts of the world, it really showcased and highlighted American leadership being abdicated under the Biden administration. And it really showcased a daylight between America and some of its European allies, including Poland, which, as we have reported, has had this back and forth with the Biden administration regarding sending MiG Air Force airplanes, I should say, to Ukraine to defend its skies against a Russian invasion, which the Biden administration is now shut down. So what I think really this administration has to be doing now moving forward, instead of laughing, they need to be unequivocal in their declaration that any move by Russia on NATO territory will be met with American resolve and the full force of NATO. Anything but this simply invites more Russian aggression, and the people of Ukraine will continue to suffer.
It is interesting to watch this play out, and again, I'm not advocating for one side or the other, for no-fly zone and providing planes and things like that. But what you hear from the administration is, oh, well, we don't want to escalate things. We're being very careful. We don't want to, put Putin in a position where he might use chemical weapons or things like that. We don't want to cause an escalation. And then the next thing you hear is Vladimir Putin's bombing a maternity ward at a hospital, and he's the one escalating things. They seem to be so reactive to everything he does. There is no proaction in their strategy. George.
Let's contextualize this approach, this risk aversion by the Biden administration that, in fact, has already resulted in a full-scale war between Russia and Ukraine. I'm not sure what other actions the Biden administration could possibly take that would further risk a full-on invasion and the bombing of civilians and over 2 million refugees. But this really all started, I believe, on day one of the Biden administration. On day one of this administration, Joe Biden went to war against the American energy industry. He subsequently oversaw a disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan, and he waived sanctions on Russia's Nord Stream 2 pipeline, which connected Russia and Germany. These, of course, were all policies that were diametrically opposed to the Trump administration's foreign policy towards Russia and Ukraine, which kept stability on the European continent. And unfortunately, what's happening now is that Ukraine is once again on the front lines of Russian revanchism. And while, of course, Ukraine is not a member of either the EU or NATO, the invasion by Russia has now led to a moral security and energy security question that all countries around the world have to take into account. And this is something that could have easily been prevented just if some of these policies would have remained intact from the Trump administration. The Biden administration must be proactive. Joe Biden had one job. It was to prevent Vladimir Putin, not to confront Vladimir Putin. We've gone beyond that. It's time for Joe Biden to show that America is still in the game, show teeth, and back up our allies, because the longer this continues, the more emboldened Putin will be. And not only Putin, China is also a player to watch.
Yeah, we get more announcements. We got this most favored nation status thing today. We'll see if that does anything. George, real quickly, we're going to see these protests in Moscow this Sunday. Alexei Navalny, the jailed Putin critic is calling for them. How big do you think the protests will be?
I think it would be a historic mistake to assume that autocracy is the future of Russia. I think that the U.S. and the West, as a principle, should be defending opponents of Putin in Russia who do not want to see their country go down this autocratic path of self-destruction. I think that Navalny's imprisonment is a shame to the Russian society, to Russian people. And as a reflection of that, you are seeing thousands of people now going out and protesting all over Russia to the extent where they are being arrested. I think we do need to support these democracy seekers in Russia because the future rests with democracy in Russia, not autocracy, and those people need to be supported.
Yeah, the Russian people have chosen autocracy too many times, from the Tsar to the Russian Revolution, the Bolshevik Revolution, the Soviet Union. There was a brief period when we were kids, George, when there was democracy in Russia, but that's long gone now. Great to see you, as always. George Papadopoulos.
Thank you, John.
Hey, I'm Rob Finnerty. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please join the conversation in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe, too. Hit the bell icon to be alerted to breaking news. And remember, there's a whole lot more on Newsmax TV, America's fastest growing cable news network. Newsmax TV, we're real news for real people.